In this video, I'm going to look at the questioning of Hermann Göring at Nuremberg on what he did after Kristallnacht to steal property from Jewish people then living in Germany. In this video, I'm going to follow the line of questioning of Justice Robert Jackson. Kristallnacht, the nationwide anti-Jewish pogrom of the 9th or 10th of November 1938, marked a decisive escalation in Nazi persecution of the Jews. The orders for it clearly came from Hitler, and I've done a video on this subject, the link to which appears below and at the end of this presentation. While the violence on the streets was carried out by the SA, SS and Nazi Party activists, Hermann Göring played a central role in transforming the pogrom from chaotic violence into a centrally coordinated program of economic destruction. The immediate pretext for Kristallnacht was the assassination of German diplomat Ernst von Rath in Paris. Nazi leaders used the event to unleash attacks across the Reich, including the newly annexed parts, Austria and the Sudetenland. More than 1,000 synagogues were burned or damaged, thousands of Jewish businesses were looted, at least 91 Jews were murdered, and approximately 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps or detained in some other way. Although the regime initially claimed that the violence was spontaneous, it was quickly followed by decisive state intervention. Here, Göring's role was absolutely crucial. As plenipotentiary of the four-year plan and one of the most powerful figures in the regime, he was less concerned with the human cost of the pogrom than with its economic implications. Göring complained that uncontrolled violence damaged valuable property and disrupted the German economy. His solution was not to halt persecution, but to systemize and monetize it. On the 12th of November 1938, just 2 days after the pogrom, Göring convened a high-level meeting at the Air Ministry to address what he called the Jewish question. Acting on instructions transmitted from Hitler via Martin Bormann, Göring made clear that the issue was to be solved one way or the other. The outcome was a series of decrees that reshaped Kristallnacht into state-organized plunder. Jews were forced to pay for all damage caused during the pogrom, while insurance payments that would normally have compensated them were confiscated by the state. Göring also announced a collective fine of 1 billion Reichsmarks on German Jewry and accelerated the policy of Aryanization, driving Jews out of economic life entirely. In these measures, Göring openly articulated the goal of eliminating Jews from the German economy. Shops and businesses were closed or transferred to non-Jewish owners. Jews were banned from many professions, and subsequent decrees ordered the surrender of valuables such as jewellery and precious metals. Göring himself acknowledged that these steps formed a single coherent policy rather than isolated reactions to unrest. Göring's language at the 12th of November 1938 meeting revealed a clear understanding of the consequences. He remarked that he wouldn't like to be a Jew in Germany. His actions show that Kristallnacht was not merely a sudden outbreak of violence, but a turning point at which anti-Jewish terror was transformed into law-based, state-directed economic annihilation. In short, while Göring didn't orchestrate the street violence of Kristallnacht, he was instrumental in structural legality and lasting impact. Under his authorities, the pogrom became a decisive step towards the systematic exclusion, impoverishment, and eventual destruction of Europe's Jews. Nearly 7.5 years later, Göring was in court to answer his behaviour in the wake of Kristallnacht. In court on the 20th of March 1946, Justice Robert Jackson walks Hermann Göring through a chain of anti-Jewish decrees. He begins with the law on damage from the November riots, from Kristallnacht. Jackson puts it to Göring that his decree said two key things. First, that all damage to Jewish property caused by the November 1938 riots had to be repaired by the Jews themselves. Second, that any insurance money that would normally have gone to the victims was instead forfeited to the Reich. When Jackson presses him on whether he signed this Kristallnacht decree, Göring answers in his usual evasive way. I did sign a similar law, but in essence he accepts that the substance is correct. This law was nothing other than a state-engineered act of massive theft. Jews were forced to pay to repair damage they hadn't caused, and the compensation from their own insurance policies, which they had paid for, was confiscated by the state. Göring admits he signed it, but he tried to distance himself with the word similar. Legally, though, the effect is crystal clear: collective punishment and expropriation. Jackson then moves to the next measure passed on the same day, still under Göring's authority as head of the 4-year plan. He asked if Göring also signed a decree that banned Jews from owning retail shops, from operating workshops, and from acting as business leaders or members of cooperatives. Göring's answer is remarkably frank. He says, "Those are parts of the decrees for the elimination of Jewry from economic life." It's one of the rare moments where he openly states the aim: the total removal of Jews from the German economy. Law-based economic strangulation. This isn't discrimination. It's a decisive step towards systematic persecution, a key milestone on the path from exclusion to annihilation. Jackson stays in the same sequence of measures and continues forward in time. He reminds Göring of further decrees issued after Kristallnacht. On the 21st of February 1939, ordering Jews to surrender all objects made from precious metals and jewels within 2 weeks. And on the 3rd of March 1939, an implementing decree on the surrender of jewellery. Jackson's question is simple. Did you sign these decrees? And were they part of one continuous measure? Göring doesn't flatly deny it. Instead, he says that as far as he recalls, they formed one single measure. Now, Jackson's structure here is deliberate. He connects the pogrom itself, the night of the 9th to the 10th of November 1938, to a cascade of theft. First, forcing Jews to pay for the damage, then driving them out of economic life, and finally confiscating their valuables. Göring's admission that these decrees were one single measure is important. He is implicitly acknowledging that Kristallnacht and the follow-up laws form a coherent program of persecution, not a set of isolated acts. At this point, Jackson turns from the laws to the meeting that took place 2 days after Kristallnacht on the 12th November 1938 at the Air Ministry. He reads from the stenographic record where Göring opens the session. Göring tells the assembled officials, "Gentlemen, today's meeting is of decisive nature." He then explains that he has received a letter from Martin Bormann conveying Hitler's orders, stating that the Jewish question is to be coordinated and solved one way or another. Jackson asks, "Is that correct?" Göring replies quite simply, "Yes, that's correct." This short exchange anchors Hitler's involvement. Göring is not acting on his own initiative, but he's acting on a letter from Bormann, explicitly conveying the Führer's instructions. The phrase "solved one way or another" is vague. In 1938, the official line was still expulsion, segregation, the destruction of livelihoods. But read with the hindsight of what followed, it has much darker resonance. Kristallnacht was a political and economic disaster, and this meeting is about shifting from chaotic violence to a more controlled, centrally directed destruction of Jewish existence in Germany. Jackson then highlights another passage from the same meeting. Here Göring complains about the pogrom itself. In the minutes, Göring says that he's had enough of these demonstrations, meaning Kristallnacht-style riots. Why? Because he argues that they don't really harm the Jews, insurance companies have to pay for them, and valuable goods needed for the German economy are destroyed in the chaos. Jackson asks if this is an accurate record. Göring agrees, yes, quite correct. Within the same set of minutes, there's a discussion between Göring and Reinhard Heydrich about Jewish badges and ghettos. Jackson reads Heydrich's proposal that all Jews should be required to wear a distinguishing badge in line with the Nuremberg laws. He then reads Göring's response, which runs along the lines of, "You will not be able to avoid the creation of ghettos. And he goes on to talk about concentrating Jews in particular areas of the cities. Jackson asks Göring whether he did, in fact, say this. Göring answers, "I said that." He then tries to explain it away. He claims that the intention was to group Jewish tenants together because of problems with tenancy regulations, and he suggests that badges could protect individual Jews by making them clearly identifiable, especially foreign Jews, whom, he implies, might otherwise be attacked by mistake. Jackson then focuses on a remark in the minutes by Economics Minister Walter Funk. Funk says, "Jews will have to stand together. What are 3 million? Everyone will have to stand up for the next fellow. Alone, he will starve." Jackson asked Göring to confirm this passage and presses him on what it implies about starvation. Göring acknowledges the remark, but insists that elsewhere in the minutes it also says, "One cannot let the Jews starve." Jackson's purpose here is to show that leadership are consciously discussing starvation, both as a risk and as a potential tool of control. Göring, by contrast, clings to the line that they did not intend to starve Jews. We know from later practice in the East that this isn't true. Deliberate starvation planning, the so-called hunger plan, and the reality of ghetto conditions in Poland and elsewhere show that starvation was used as an instrument of policy. When you set this alongside the testimony from Otto Ehrendorf about mass shootings in the East, or Rudolf Höss's about the gas chambers at Auschwitz, Göring's assurances about protecting Jews from starvation and death ring completely hollow. Finally, Jackson turns to the billion-mark fine and Göring's chilling aside. Towards the end of the session, Göring announces that German Jewry will have to pay for what he calls the abominable crimes, a reference to the assassination of the German diplomat von Rath in Paris. He states that he demands a contribution of 1 billion Reichsmarks from the Jews of Germany. Jackson reads this line from the minutes and asks Göring to confirm it. Göring's answer is straightforward. Yes, that was correct, yes. This is collective punishment, pure and simple. An entire group of people, which had been some 400,000 strong only 5 years previously, is fined an enormous sum for the act of a single young man. 1 billion Reichsmarks is not symbolic, it's designed to be ruinous. In the same passage, the minutes record Göring adding a line that has become emblematic. He says that with this fine imposed, the pigs will not commit a second murder so quickly, and concludes, "I wouldn't like to be a Jew in Germany." Jackson reads that back to him at Nuremberg and asked if that is accurate. Once again, Göring doesn't deny it. That was correct, yes. Through the cross-examination, Göring has tried to explain away criminating phrases by saying that they were jokes or things that he didn't really mean. After reading the billion-mark fine and the sentence, "I wouldn't like to be a Jew in Germany," Jackson asks him, "Were you joking about that too?" Göring replies, "I have told you exactly what led to the fine." He doesn't retract anything. He doesn't soften it. He simply repeats his explanation of the supposed content. This is one of Jackson's most effective rhetorical moments. Göring might have scored points elsewhere in the duel, but on Kristallnacht and the economic persecution of the Jews, Jackson pins him down. Göring has admitted that he has made decisions about stealing the property of all the Jews in Germany. I hope you found that interesting. I've done a number of videos on both Nuremberg and on Göring. My specialization in history is the Holocaust. I upload every day at 2000 hours Central European time. That's my time because I live in Poland and in Germany. Now, on most days I have a short video of up to about 3 minutes in length, but on Tuesdays and Fridays I do longer videos, documentary style videos such as this one. I also offer membership of this channel. Membership costs £5 or €6 or $6, and this will now give you access to over 800 members only films. For the moment, thanks for watching. Bye for now.